am the very model of a Gallifreyan buccaneer. I've information on all things a Gallifreyan holds, monsieur. I've linked it to the matrix through his excitonic circuitry. I understand dimensional and relative chronometry. I'm very well acquainted too with matters of the Capitol. I'll give you a verse and chapter on Panopticonian protocol. I've been into the death zone and I played the game of Rassilon. Rassilon? 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 Aha. With pestilential monsters that I got a lot of hassle from. With pestilential monsters that he got a lot of hassle from. With pestilential monsters that he got a lot of hassle from. With pestilential monsters that he got a lot of hassle from. I understand each language and I speak every vernacular. Our conjugated verbs good, clannish, and irregular. In short, in every matter that a Gallifreyan holds, monsieur, I am the very model of a Gallifreyan buccaneer.
Hello and welcome to the quick guide to Big Finish Classic Who, Evelyn Smythe. In case you missed the earlier videos, I'm going by companions, because for most Classic Who releases, Big Finish didn't have series as. The stories tended to jump around each Doctor's timeline, and as far as I can tell, there's no official authoritative agreed on timeline for adventures. So I've separated them out by companion. Hopefully it'll make things easier for everyone, and make it harder for me to miss any stories. Evelyn was the original Big Finish companion, and what a companion she was. 55 years old, bolshy, divorced, cake-making, knitting-loving history lecturer with a heart condition that she's hiding from the doctor. She had a personality just as strong as Six has. She wouldn't be cowed by his speeches, and wouldn't let herself be steamrolled by the force of his will. I don't know for sure, but I believe her personality was designed to house-train Sex. Colin Baker wanted him to evolve and become a kinder figure, and it was decided that a good way for this to happen, in-universe, was for him to meet someone who refused to give him an inch, forcing him to evolve into the Big Finish 6 we have today. And it worked brilliantly. Evelyn was played by Maggie Stables, who got into acting after retiring as a French teacher. Hers is a brilliantly atypical journey to companiondom. She once did some local theatre with Nick Briggs, who kept in touch, and later cast her in one of the initial Big Finish releases, The Sirens of Time, and based on that she was offered Evelyn. She retired from acting in 2013 and died the next year, so Evelyn's time in the TARDIS was brief, in Big Finish terms, but vibrant. Now, before we begin, these adventures, as in Evelyn's, can only either be bought second-hand or downloaded directly from Big Finish's website. Most of these are the earliest Big Finish releases, so the CD copies are expensive. But the digital ones are among the cheapest they offer. I'm not kidding when I say it's possible to spend more on a single CD release of a single Evelyn story than to buy her whole run on download, so keep that in mind before starting a collection. And downloads aren't a one-time deal and don't require anything special to play. You buy it and you can download the MP3 copy as many times as you want. Unless things change at Big Finish, you buy it, it's yours forever. Evelyn's first appearance was in the Marion conspiracy, doing a history lecture when it's interrupted by the Doctor. She's a temporal paradox and the universe is dealing with it by erasing her. You see, one of her ancestors suddenly wasn't born, and that won't do. So the Doctor decides to go back and set things right, and over the Doctor's complaints, Evelyn decides to join him.
So I'm going to pop back to Elizabeth's court and find out what I can about him.
How?
Well, when you have a time machine, anything's possible.
I see. Wait there.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I've only got a world to say, but I'll just wait here.
Toothbrush, toothpaste, soap.
And what exactly are you doing?
Unpacking.
May I ask why?
If you think I'm going to sit around here waiting to fade away, you're very much mistaken. Could you pass me that tin of cocoa?
Cocoa?
Just behind the breadboard. That's it. Thank you. Chocolate wasn't introduced to England until the mid-17th century, you know, and I have no intention of going without my daily ration.
They find themselves embroiled in a conspiracy to assassinate Queen Mary, older half-sister of Elizabeth I. The issue is, she's some years away from dying, and on the verge of beginning her massacre of the Protestants. This one's a pure historical, and rather than inciting a grand rebellion as the Doctor usually does, this one's about stopping one, to keep history intact. Now, early Big Finish tended towards more adult and experimental fare, because pre-New Who, the show's almost entire fan base had grown up with the show and reached adulthood, and the people in charge of writing the stories wanted to evolve beyond family entertainment. This also happened in the books, but where the books usually resulted in weird edginess or unexpected sex scenes, in Big Finish it usually meant experimental stories and nuance. I said usually, Necromantia. For instance, here we have a Mary who is a genuinely good person who truly believes in doing the right thing. Unfortunately, she believes that the right thing to do involves burning everyone who disagrees with her at the stake. Anyway, this is an excellent introduction for Evelyn and a great, though atypical story. Well worth a listen. Evelyn's next story is the Spectra of Lanyon Moor, where Six finally, officially meets the Brigadier.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I can smell coffee.
Allow me to introduce the,
Brigadier.
Oh, have you two met before?
We most certainly have. Lethbridge Stewart, you old rogue, how are you?
I'm extremely well, thank you.
You know who I am?
To judge by the clothes, the unexpected arrival, and the manner of your greeting, I can only conclude that I know exactly who you are. I take it there's a police box somewhere in the vicinity.
You're getting better at this, aren't you, Brigadier?
Well, I've had some experience, haven't I? It's good to see you, Doctor.
They met in Dimensions in Time, but that doesn't really count because it's Dimensions in Time and this sort of crap happens in it.
Our whole existence is being threatened by a renegade Time Lord known only as the Rani. She hates me. She even hates children. 2 of my earlier selves have already been snared in her vicious trap. The Grumpy One and the Flautist, do you remember them?
Anyway, the Spectre of Lanyon Moor is set in Cornwall, and a local dickhead has been siphoning the powers of an alien exile and suspended animation. But what happens when the alien wakes up again? The finale happens, that's what. Apart from the Brigadier being a main character, what I love is that there's a bunch of Cornish history stuff thrown in. I'm a history buff, and I've never been to Cornwall, but now I know what a fugu is. A type of ancient man-made tunnel that you find in Cornwall. The story's villainous dickhead is hilariously one-dimensional, badly quoting Aleister Crowley and blathering about magic in his manor house. It felt like a ridiculous sequence from a bad Hammer horror film, but in a fun way. Especially when Evelyn started using her finely honed, middle-aged, middle-class Karen powers to get in some cutting verbal thrusts before the guy could start melting her eyeballs.
You please untie me. I'll be missed, you know.
That doesn't really matter. By the time people come looking, I'll be in charge.
You're a bit crackers, aren't you?
Am I? It's all so subjective, isn't it? Who says I'm cracker?
I do. And everyone I can think of offhand would agree if they were here now.
But they're not, are they? Intellect, ambition, innovation, bravery, the courage to move beyond the stifling parameters of social conformity. These have always been regarded as signs of madness by the plodding majority.
You're starting to sound like Dr. Faustus now. Do you know what happened to him?
My dear Dr. Smythe, religion is for people who believe in hell. Magic is for people who have been there.
Magic? What are you ranting about now? You really are crackers, aren't you?
Have you ever heard of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn?
Yes, I think so. Something to do with that narcissistic charlatan who wrote awful poetry. Crowley. Aleister Crowley. Filed his teeth into points and called himself the Beast. He was a bit of a joke, really.
He was a prophet, Dr. Smythe. His vision was the dissolution of universal morality.
Rubbish. He wasn't a prophet. At the very best, he was a cut-price Nietzsche.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Well, exactly. What kind of feeble philosophy is that? My students observe it every Friday night. It's just an excuse for a good party dressed up in a bit of medieval lingo.
You babbling inadequate. As you're about to learn, I have made rather more of it than that.
I'm sure you have. But as I pointed out earlier, you're crackers.
Well, my service may no longer be required, but my blood cannot be taken from me so easily.
Oh, don't let's get above ourselves, old chum. You're only a baronet, you know. That makes you a commoner, like me. You might think I have no sense of history, but I'm sufficiently up on the subject to know that your ancestors probably bought you your place on the lowest rung of the aristocracy.
I'm sure his annihilation at the mind of the alien felt like nothing compared to those burns. Anyway, this is solid, basic Doctor Who. I'm just sad that after it, the Brigadier was mostly limited to the unit spin-offs, until Nicholas Courtney died. He's recently been recast with Impressionist John Coulshaw, though, and started to pop up here and there. So that's good and not before time. After that, there's the Apocalypse element, where Six and Evelyn meet Romana, having returned to normal space after leaving E-space, where 4 left her in Warrior's Gate. This is the first time Lalla Ward reprised the role since leaving the TV show. Like I said, Dimensions in Time doesn't count.
Well, I've seen them thrown out of the Vic, but never dragged in.
It also marks Six's first Big Finish encounter with the Daleks. This was the second part of Big Finish's first cross-promotion story arc, the Dalek Empire. starting with 7's story of the genocide machine, going on to 5's the mutant phase, and ending with 8's time in the Daleks. You don't need to listen to them all to enjoy the individual parts, though. Anyway, this is the Daleks at their most hardcore. I won't spoil it for you, but they have more brutal success in this story than they manage in whole decades of TV Who. A wham episode that accidentally sets up the Time War, and Big Finish's long-running Gallifrey spin-off. All this, and it actually explains the human retinal scan to open the Eye of Harmony in the McGann movie.
Open the eye!
And it even mostly makes sense. This story is the typical crap Time Lord's norm, but handled much better than usual. That could sum up the story as a whole, actually. Classic Who fallible Time Lord stuff mixed with New Who Time War stuff, but an improvement on both. Anyway, I have one weird complaint. There's an important side character called Trinket, and the woman who plays her sounds distractingly like Sarah Sutton who plays Nyssa.
Sounds like the Daleks are throwing themselves against the doors.
Quite frantic, aren't they?
Wait, those explosions we heard.
With that self-destructing thing they did back on Architrix. Of course. Well, they must be doing more damage to the doors that way.
Less Daleks to deal with, I suppose.
Shows you how confident they are of victory. Or how desperate they're starting to become.
That's the man who brought me from Draken.
Yes.
He said he was a friend of yours.
Luckily, there's a trick to tell them apart. The Daleks almost completely destroyed Trinket's homeworld and she won't shut up about it. Well, the Master completely destroyed Nyssa's homeworld and she eventually shut up about it.
Doctor, my world has been torn apart. Wiped out for all I know.
I know.
Next is Blood Tide, the first Big Finish Silurian story. It's the Galapagos Islands, Charles Darwin is on the Beagle, and some Silurians are really fucked off that humans own their planet. Again. It'd be nice if they came up with a new plot for them sometime. This is pretty good, but has some extreme problems. Some of the voice acting, which is trying to be serious, has amazingly silly accents, bordering on the racist sometimes.
I am Greta Rodriguez, Governor. The prisoner is my brother. I come to plead on his behalf.
Guard, remove this Greta woman.
I come to plead for mercy. My brother is not well. He has not been acting himself. Please, Governor Lawson.
Your brother is a traitor.
The Silurian voice of the 70s is pretty much recreated.
This strange species has developed some kind of civilization. We need to study it. The species is dangerous and hostile.
Which the nerd in me is incredibly happy about. But the person listening to this in me found really hard to listen to after a while.
Tulok, the ape creature called the Doctor. It seems to have heard of our people.
But that is impossible, Chivak. None of the other apes have known about us. How can this one have knowledge the others do not?
You know what this means. Perhaps these creatures have met us before.
But how? None of the other Silurian clans survived.
I did like Evelyn and Six ingratiating themselves with Darwin while trying not to influence Sam, only to be drawn into discussions and arguments about the origins of life.
And Cuvier, you have read Cuvier?
Of course.
He has observed that the fossil creatures exhibit a morphology. As we approach the present, the creatures more closely resemble those of today. But here is my dilemma.
Go on.
The Bible tells us that this world of ours is a mere 6,000 years old, that the Lord created in 6 days, that there was but one flood. So to my mind, these fossils should not exist. And yet, why did the Lord bring such creatures into being if only to destroy them?
Evolution as a concept wasn't actually created by Darwin. It had been around for about a century at that point. So these sorts of discussions aren't quite as ahistorical as they might sound at first blush. Also, fun fact, but this story reveals, quite matter-of-factly, that humanity was created by a Silurian mad scientist. And it's deeply, deeply hilarious to me that humanity being the result of intelligent design only came up in a story featuring Charles Darwin. Evelyn's next appearance is in Project Twilight, the beginning of another arc, this time dealing with a recurring villain, a vampire called Nimrod. Vampires are a thing in the Who universe and first appeared all the way back in the 80s. But interestingly, the extended arc only really exists because the producers were so impressed with the performance from Stephen Chance, who played Nimrod, and wanted to bring him back.
So you still haven't worked it out?
Worked out what exactly?
I'm disappointed, Doctor. Your file back at the forge made for impressive reading, but I'm afraid in the flesh you don't live up to expectation.
I'll get over it. Just tell me why you have no qualms about persecuting these poor people.
Amelia really has woven her spell on you, hasn't she? These poor people have more blood on their hands than most dictators see in a lifetime, Doctor.
Nimrod is the head of the Forge, an evil science organisation working for British intelligence. Think of it as Torchwood before Torchwood. He's a vampire, he's evil, he hunts other vampires, and has all sorts of cybernetic implants. Originally, they wanted to use one of the audiovisuals villains, but they weren't allowed to, so Nimrod was created instead. One of the other guest characters is Cassie, interesting because her son Thomas will later travel with the 7th Doctor under the name Hex. Naturally, Evelyn and the Doctor get embroiled with Nimrod and all the related vampire shenanigans, thanks to some mysterious killings. This is a gritty and grimy story with the sort of violence and death that the TV show wouldn't, or couldn't, touch. Equal parts vampires, gangsters, and gothic. An uncompromising, but any of them. I'm not the biggest fan of the Nimrod stories, but Six and Evelyn are in top form, and emotionally this sends Six into some interesting places. Next release was Real Time, and it's the odd one out in the Evelyn stories, because it really doesn't fit anywhere. It was made with the BBC as a webcast, some very basic animation, for the fledgling BBC Doctor Who web presence. It was 2002, the 40th anniversary was coming up, and the BBC was making baby steps into trying to maybe make Doctor Who a thing again. And a trio of these stories were made, and none of them fit 100% into their respective continuities. Death Comes to Time with 7 being the worst, because it kills them, and Ace becomes a Time Lord. Basically, Real Time is a remake of Tomb of the Cybermen, but being told in real time. And it ends up in a hell of a cliffhanger, because the cyber controller that they've been fighting all along is Evelyn. And the Doctor and Evelyn just left, her infected with a thing that will turn into a cyber controller.
Let's take your faceplate off. Look upon my face with your own eyes one last time. No, it can't be. Evelyn.
Destroy!
And then there was no follow-up, and since Maggie Stables is dead and it was released over 20 years ago, there's probably not going to be one. So that's great. I generally liked Real Time. It's not the wittiest or cleverest script, but it's got some good ideas. The twist is phenomenal, there's some very nasty cyber violence on display, and the cast is great. Apart from Colin Baker and Maggie Stables, there's Chang Lee from the McGann movie. I realise that's not actually the actor's name, but I cannot pronounce that. And butchering it as badly as I would feels even more disrespectful than just calling him Chang Lee. And most randomly of all, in retrospect, among the smaller roles, we have a young Stuart Lee. Years before he let himself go, wrote Jerry Springer the Opera and broke down the walls between stand-up comedy and weird performance art. And his old comedy partner, Richard Herring, often one of the main characters on International Women's Day, turns up too. Probably Real Time's most enduring legacy was it introduced Six's blue set. You see, the webcast animation had to be so simple that it couldn't handle his usual look, so they created the blue one. In universe, the change happened because of a misunderstanding between Six and Evelyn. Mixing up mourning, start of the day, with mourning, someone's died. You see, blue is the colour of mourning on Necros, the planet galactic funeral staff.
Blue is the official colour of mourning on Necros.
And there's two different versions of the suit, the solid blue real-time version, seen in real time, and this action figure, or the patchwork version that recreates the Colpassion patterns in Six's usual code, seen here in the cover to Spaceport Fear. Which is ironic, because Spaceport Fear is one of the few stories where it's explicitly stated in the script what outfit Six is wearing. And he's wearing his usual multicoloured stuff.
I'm Mel, and this is the Doctor.
Stay back. I haven't done anything.
Nor have we.
Did you bring Summer?
I have been known to light up a room.
Usually with his coat of many colours.
Oh, yes. We make our clothes in the dark too.
Charming.
Which makes sense, because Six stopped wearing the blue because he made a promise to Mel and the wrong doctors.
The other Doctor.
He's safe. Thank you.
You're different. You're Nice.
Ooh, nice. Nice. Well, I suppose that's what experience does for you. And good company.
I liked his coat.
Then I shall wear it again. For you.
But that promise can be taken two ways. One, he'll stop wearing the blue from then on. Or two, that he'll wear the multicolored outfit when with her. I go with two, but some people feel 6 in blue after the wrong doctors, such as in the Raincloud Man, is a continuity error. So where did 6 get the idea of getting a blue version of his set? Well, in Wink, 6 met 10 on a planet with blinding light, so to see they used a darkness torch. And 10 commented that 6's outfit looked blue in the beam of dusk and that it looked good.
Hello!
Let's see if this thing works.
A shadow lamp? Don't be ridiculous. I haven't seen a shadow lamp since I had a penchant for absurd hats. You're not wearing a silly hat, are you?
It should cast a beam of shade, cancel out some of the light, then we can see what we're doing out here. Ah! Hello, Doctor! Oh, it's you, blimey. You've a nerve going on about the hats, Joseph.
Joseph?
With your amazing Technicolor dream monstrosity. It looks better under the shadow lamp. Tones of blue.
So 10, who wore blue, told 6 to wear blue, who then remembered wearing blue as 6, and did the same thing as 10.
This is called the bootstrap paradox. Google it.
And that's not even going into 6's best outfit, the purple one from the Ultimate Adventure. The Sandman is next, and it's got a very interesting idea. Basically, we get to see the Doctor from the point of view of an old enemy. The Galyari are a chameleon-like species who once tried to genocide a harmless species called the Kushkaru. The Galyari thought they were vermin and the Doctor disagreed. The Doctor, partly deliberately and partly by happenstance, set himself up as a mythical figure to the Galyari, the Sandman. They believe that he causes every bad thing that happens to them, that he collects their skins, that he stalks and preys upon them, and they cannot look upon him without pain and death. But now is the time to drop the charade. Unfortunately, when he comes aboard their nomadic space fleet, there's something killing and collecting skins, and naturally they believe it's the work of the Sandman. This is a great bit of work. I love seeing the Doctor from the other perspective, and comparing the Galyari version of events, told down through the generations, to the Doctor's first-hand account. There's a lot of great world building as they explore how a society structured as an interconnected space fleet works, and even stuff about how the mundane can dovetail into myth. The actual plot isn't too interesting, but it's really there as an excuse for the world, and for the ideas to exist. And it's a great world, and it's full of great ideas.
Freighters, mining ships, manufactories, refineries, whole vessels given over to living quarters. They're all in there somewhere. The visiting ships are hyperspace capable, whereas the vast majority of Galyari craft are not.
Unlike any sensible fleet, they travel at the speed of their slowest component.
Precisely. An exodus on this scale is measured in generations. People like Mr. Morrican here are visitors, in every sense, growing up, making a living and ultimately dying, handing over to their progeny while the fleet moves on. Like parasites following a herd of elephants.
Doctor, you could have chosen a more flattering simile.
Yeah?
The show really needs to revisit how different groups would react to the Doctor based on their interactions. Though the Doctor really should have explained what really happened to Evelyn before they arrived, so she wasn't quite so confused when he suddenly started claiming to be the devil to a bunch of mostly pleasant space lizards.
Welcome, orchestrator. I think you know who I am.
I do, Sandman.
You needn't grovel quite so much. Your name is Scholl, I take it.
Doctor?
Quiet, Evelyn.
I am Scholl. It is a proud and ancient name.
Well, let's hope it lives to be even more ancient, shall we? I've had dealings with a number of orchestrators in my time, and I've found their level of cooperation far from satisfying. Am I going to have the same problem with you?
Not from me. I will respond to your demands. But on condition
You
that...
dare to impose conditions on me! Remember who you are dealing with, Scholl! Look at me!
I cannot...
I said, look at me!
Please, make your demands and I will see to it that my people comply. But I beg you, do not ask me that. It is death to look on you.
Nonsense. I know it's painful sometimes, but the Doctor's no monster.
Evelyn, that is where you are very wrong. The Galliari have known me a lot longer than you. Isn't that so, Orchestrator?
It is true. We all know the tales. We grow up with them.
And with good reason. So you see, Evelyn, I am every bit the monster they believe me to be.
Fun fact, Annika Wills, who played Polly on the TV show alongside the first and second Doctors, plays one of the antagonists, Rector Nerotia. So that's cool. Jubilee is considered one of Big Finish's earliest triumphs. Scripted by Robert Shearman, it was the basis for Dalek in New Who Series 1. But Dalek only took parts of the rich tapestry of Jubilee. The Doctor alone in the room facing the Dalek, the powerful mad dickhead who trapped the Dalek for years demanding it speak, the Dalek getting weirdly attached to the companion, stuff like that. It missed out on so much more. Like little people having pieces chopped off their bodies and sealed inside Dalek shells as the power mad dickhead's pets.
In you pop.
Rochester! You really mean you collect dwarves and make them get inside Dalek costumes for your entertainment?
They dance, they sing, and sometimes I pretend I fight them, just as my great-grandfather did 100 years ago.
I cannot fit, sir.
What?
The cavity is too narrow. I cannot get the door closed.
What? That treacherous Yankee, he has sent me too big a dwarf.
I'm sorry, sir, it's the hand.
Oh, then we shall have to get rid of it, shall we not?
Rochester, you can't!
Oh, do not worry, Doctor. Remember, I am not really evil. I am just pretending.
This is all an act.
Of course. I want to be a good man. You know that.
No!
Or the parody trailer of a Hollywoodized movie about the Doctor defeating the Daleks.
But in a time of perils and crises, one man shall emerge to be the savior of us all.
What is that ominous sound?
Daleks. I hate these guys.
Oh no! It is the Doctor! Scarpa! 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 Scarpa!
Daleks, the ultimate adventure, coming to a cinema near you soon. Your supervisor will inform you of the cinema to which you have been assigned. Attendance is compulsory by order of the Historical Instruction Act. All praise the glorious English Empire.
Or far, far more.
Death to the Daleks!
Listen to me! The Daleks were genetically engineered to see all other life as a threat. Human beings are different. Humans have a choice. What excuse do you have?
But the plot. The Doctor and Evelyn have found themselves in an alternate 2003, one where the English Empire rules the world after the Great Dalek War of 1903, where the heroic Doctor and Evelyn delivered the world to the Empire's hands by stopping the Dalek invasion, but didn't stop the English Empire from using Dalek tech to conquer the world. And now, a century later, the Daleks are little more than a kitsch memory, and the Doctor and Evelyn have been reimagined as an action hero and his glamorous lover.
And introducing Plenty O'Toole as Evelyn Hotlips Smythe.
Oh, Doctor. Now you have defeated the Daleks. Would you like to defeat me?
Don't mind if I do.
And of course, the Doctor who fought in 1903 has spent all of that time trapped in the Tower of London, imprisoned, mutilated, and driven mad by the Empire he accidentally helped create.
Really, you?
Doctor!
I thought I'd never see you again. Forgive me for not getting up to greet you, but you see, they've cut off my legs.
Just stumps. Why? Why did they do this to you?
Oh, it was my own fault. They told me if I kept trying to escape, they'd be forced to do something drastic.
It's monstrous.
Oh, you mustn't blame them. They did it with anaesthetic and everything. I didn't feel a thing. And they've told me if I cooperate, they'll stick them back on again. That was a long time ago. Did you know I had a friend called Evelyn?
Yes, Doctor. I'm here.
No, she died. Human beings can't last 100 years, you know. For a while I had Evelyn to talk to, and then it was just her bones. And they took them away from me too in time.
Are you saying I died? In here?
You humans are so fragile.
It's all right, Doctor. I've come for you. I'll take you away from this dreadful place.
No! No, leave me alone.
Doctor!
The tower, it's my home. It may not look like much, but it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside.
This is basically a massive metafiction take on the Daleks, Dalek mania, empire, fascism, xenophobia, the media, and it is spectacular. That's all there is to it. Spectacular. So I'll just give you some trivia. Jubilee is so well regarded that it still occasionally gets referenced. In New Who, there's a recurring pizza franchise called Jubilee Pizzas, named after the story. And this was the first Big Finish story to use the Trial of a Time Lord theme. Earlier on, all the Doctor Who releases used the 70s mix. I've not confirmed it, but I assume it took a while to work out the music licensing. Next is Doctor Who and the Pirates, and it is magnificent. This is another of Big Finish's experimental stories that's trying to do more with Doctor Who than the TV show. Basically, Evelyn has barged in on a colleague at her university and is telling her the story of how she travelled with someone called the Doctor and met some pirates. But over time, details change, she begins to spice things up. She tells and retells certain parts because, in her excitement, she accidentally put in continuity errors. She gives the Doctor a heroic sword fight and death scene, which didn't happen because the Doctor turns up to join in the storytelling. This sounds like it might be annoying, but it's really not. The meta-weirdness of the story gets so much that the Doctor decides to turn it into a musical. So we get a number of Doctor Who-themed Gilbert and Sullivan parodies. Hell, the cliffhanger in one episode is just that the Doctor is shock horror going to sing.
Then you have never truly appreciated what it is to be a buccaneer. Let me explain a few things to you. For you see, one could almost say that I am the very model of a Gallifreyan buccaneer.
Oh no, you are going to sing.
Well, yes, I am.
This is just a silly, silly, silly delight. The name references a Pertwee story, Doctor Who and the Silurians, and the pirate captain is played by the man, the myth, the goody, Bill Oddie. And I realise this won't mean much to many of you, but Oddie is giving a full-on goodies performance.
You've been drinking.
Of course I've been drinking. Of course I've been drinking.
Stupid poodle! Kill you!
The only way I can get through this black race, it makes me want to throw up!
Look, you want to see our film or not?
Yes, please.
Okay.
You think so, do you? I'll wager the contents of your hold that Red Jasper will prove you wrong. Mind, I'll take the contents of your hold, whatever. Tell your men, throw down their arms, Captain, unless you want every man jack of them to taste pirate steel. And yourself, too. In fact, I'll feed it you. Myself!
I don't like the sound of him.
Red Jasper? I've never heard of him.
Goodness, he must be very unimportant in the overall historical scheme of things, then.
That's the most irresponsible thing I've ever heard. Oh, what's wrong with it? Don't worry, my friend. I shall produce for you some of the most unbelievably gory TV shows ever devised. What? Don't worry, I'm doing it for a perfectly good reason.
Ah, what's that?
Because I like violence!
Well, Mr. London, on this ship, you'd better learn to hold your tongue. Otherwise, I'll hold it for you.
There's no need for violence. Perhaps you should just lock me and Jem here into the hold, too, while you think about what to do with us.
I don't think so.
I could be useful. I'm a very good cook. Cakes, you know. Everyone likes cakes.
I prefer skewering out eyeballs and, prizing up toenails.
No, please!
No! Leave her alone. She's just an old woman.
Who said that?
Anyway, after 4 parts of ever-increasing, over-the-top, glorious meta-silliness, we find out why Evelyn's bothering her co-worker like this. And it is both moving and spectacular. This whole thing is just an absolute classic. Project Lazarus is the second Nimrod story, and instead of being a 4-parter, this is 2 2-part stories, with Evelyn and 6 starring in the first and 7 in the second. Cassie from Project Twilight was turned into a vampire in that story and got left in the far north of Norway, with the doctor's promise that he would find a cure for her. Now he has, but Cassie, who spent years starving in the frozen tundra, is now working for the Forge. They capture the Doctor, and Nimrod tries to induce regeneration via torture. Like Project Twilight, this is on the grislier end of Who, with Cassie dying to free the Doctor and Evelyn, and their relationship on the verge of breaking down completely.
Doctor? Where's Cassie? We can't leave without her.
He killed her. Nimrod just shot her down.
Why didn't you do something?
There was nothing I could do.
Why didn't you let me do something?
Oh, what could you have done, Evelyn? He'd have killed you too.
No, there must have been a way. There always is. We have to go back for her.
Evelyn, I'm sorry. I don't always win.
No, you don't.
Now, shall I go and make us some cocoa? Is there any chocolate cake?
No, Doctor! You can't always make everything better with a cup of cocoa and a slice of cake.
Evelyn,
Cassie's dead! She isn't coming back!
Evelyn...
It gets even nastier in the second half, with 7, as years later we discover that 6 is working for Nimrod and the Forge, and 7 has no memory of that. Anyway, like I said before, I'm not a great fan of the Nimrod stories, but this one is 2 shorter and more interesting stories than Project Twilight, and it sets up another all-time classic, Arrangements for War. In this story, Evelyn is on the verge of leaving the TARDIS. She can't handle the Doctor's emotionally closed-off attitude to Cassie's death. Evelyn and Cassie really connected in the previous story.
No, I don't always win. Evelyn, how are you?
I've been thinking, Doctor.
Yes, so have I. And I have an excellent idea. Here.
No, thank you. I'll stand.
Not on ceremony, I hope.
Don't make light of this, Doctor.
No, I'm sorry, truly. I'm really not trying to.
I've spent the last few hours just thinking about things. About Cassie and what happened to her. And about your manor.
I can't change what happened. I never can. True, I may, in the past, have found myself the catalyst for events, but I cannot just go back and change what's already happened just to suit myself.
I know that, Doctor. I'm not a fool.
No, I'm sorry. Of course you're not.
But I still need time to think things through. You've had more experience at this kind of thing. I can't just switch the emotions on and off between battles for the universe.
Is that what you think I do, Evelyn?
I'm sorry, Doctor. I just...
But do you want some time on your own? Some time apart? Is that it?
I'm not sure.
Do you want to leave me?
I didn't think so.
In an effort to save their friendship, 6 brings Evelyn to the planet Villag, a pleasant, modernish alien world that's on the verge of international peace. Unfortunately, they messed it up by landing in the wrong place and talking to the wrong people, and now they have to try and set things in the right course before an alien invasion arrives. The alien invasion, that in the correct timeline was easily repelled and further gelled the planet's countries together. All usual Doctor Who stuff, but this time the Doctor and Evelyn are using their future knowledge to ingratiate themselves into the society at the highest levels in order to create that future. And then they fall afoul of the countries that they're manipulating and end up jailed as the invasion begins. There is a bunch of good stuff here. It could easily be stretched to a 6-hour TV miniseries like Flux. Evelyn ends up falling in love with a high-ranking military officer called Rossiter, who she will eventually leave the TARDIS to be with. I don't blame her though. Rossiter is played by Gabriel Wolfe, the man with the best voice in Doctor Who.
Don't turn around. Don't look at me.
Who are you?
I have so many names.
You pit your puny will against mine. Kneel. Kneel before the might of Sutek.
And then there's the ending. Oh man, the ending. Basically, Six gets his own Time Lord Victorious moment. Two people he spent months trying to help and protect are brutally murdered, and he snaps. He runs back to the TARDIS, barely aware if Evelyn's even managed to keep up with him, and he fully intends to change his own personal history so he doesn't fuck up the planet in the first place.
Doctor, what are you doing? Were you just going to leave me back there?
What? I don't... What? They're dead, Evelyn. They're both dead. And it's my fault. Directly my fault.
What are you going to do?
It mustn't happen. Not this time. Change things. I've reset the time coordinates. We'll land where we did before, but an hour earlier. I'll get to the river and send Marcus up to the palace. That way he can meet the princess without ever having met me and getting those ideas put into his head.
But how...
But nothing! It's time I stopped watching people die!
But your coat, your face, the blood...
Oh, yes, I suppose I should wash. This isn't right, Evelyn. This isn't the way it should be.
But you can't change it, Doctor. You mustn't.
And this was done years before Waters of Mars. Next is Medicinal Purposes, featuring Baby David Tennant. It's 19th century Edinburgh, and Burke and Hare, the country's most notorious body snatchers, are hard at work. They're not the main villains though, that's Dr. Robert Knox. Not the actual Dr. Robert Knox, who was living in Edinburgh at the time and working with Burke and Hare, but a made-up one. You see, the guy calling himself Knox is a human from the far future, who has acquired a TARDIS under the most exceptional circumstances, and now he uses it to profiteer through time. He set up a time loop around Edinburgh to conduct medical tests on the people for some alien clients. Because it's a time loop, they can die over and over again. And as a bonus, he can charge other aliens to watch all the suffering. Knox is played by Leslie Phillips, a UK light entertainment legend with a career dating back to 1934.
I live in polished surroundings because my body desires it. My surgery is less polished. A kitchen may be filthy in the finest of hotels. My culinary delights could save humanity, or indeed destroy it. It depends on the research. For such research, I need specimens. Cadavers. The fresher, the better.
Oh, how horrible.
Not as horrible as the damage that gut-devouring alcohol you continually pour down your swan-like neck does to your insides, my dear child.
More recently, you might have heard him as the voice of the Sorting Hat in Harry Potter. This story includes an unusually frank discussion of morality when someone, like the Doctor, takes the long view of the big picture. It's the sort of thing that Classic Who sometimes motion towards, and New Who runs away from, screaming platitudes.
The universe does not break down into good guys and bad guys. For example, would you be honoured to congratulate the medical genius of Dr. Christian Barnard, who performed the first open heart surgery?
Can't be comparing the two cases, surely. Dr. Barnard saved lives.
Only because Burke and Hare had taken lives a century or so before. I know murder can never be condoned, but if you take into account the medical benefit that others will take from their misdeeds, it becomes almost acceptable, surely.
Sounds like a grey area I don't want to go into.
Death is relative, Evelyn. Although any individual death is regrettable, in the bigger picture it can be seen in a positive light. Now, there's a huge difference between that and advocating murder for the greater gain. That was the excuse Hitler used. But does the possibility exist that if 10 or 15 murders result in thousands of lives extended, and one of those extended lives goes on to improve things even more, that there's a justification, historically speaking?
You condone it?
Oh, no! No. But I accept it.
With that, you can really see the beginnings of Seven's approach to morality forming. Only he goes further. He doesn't just condone, he arranges. Anyway, this is a great story, not one of the best, but well worth a listen, though Tennant's performance as daft Jamie, a disabled, real-life victim of broken hair, occasionally skirts from sympathetic to offensive.
Jamie? Did you say Jamie?
Doctor heard of Jamie. Jamie famous. Jamie would like to be famous.
Well, I used to know Jamie, my boy. It's an honourable name you have there. A very honourable name.
Jamie's famous.
Famous? No, not really. He was important to me mind. But then fame isn't important. It's what you do for others. Jamie put himself in mortal danger for me many times. A very brave young man. I never told him that. Pity.
Pity is a very destructive emotion.
Indeed.
Famous. Important.
Now, Jamie, come away.
Yes. Very salubrious, Doctor. I suppose a nice wine bar was out of the question?
Yes.
Doctor important.
Hello, my dear chap. How are you?
Doctor friend.
Yes, the doctor is a friend.
Hello, Jamie. How are you, dear?
Jamie is fine. Thank you for asking, Jamie.
Come on,
Doctor.
This is where Evelyn's timeline starts to get kinda screwy, because her next release story is Thicker Than Water, which dealt with how she left the TARDIS. But since that won't happen for a while, I'm going to skip forward to Peer Pressure. This one's set in the 1930s in Brighton, which is kinda like England's answer to San Francisco. Basically, the Doctor and Evelyn hang out with the local seafront celebrities and take down some malevolent aliens possessing Doug Bradley. And I really wish Pinhead had found a better story to be the villain of. There is good stuff here, though. It's just a bit tangential to the actual plot. It really makes good use of the period and setting. For instance, Max Miller, an early 20th century music hall comedian, is one of the supporting characters.
Picked himself up, went across the road, went into a music shop. Said the man behind the counter, "Do you sell mouse organs?" And the man said, "That's funny. That's funny you should say that. We had a little mouse in here yesterday, and she wanted mouse organs." The little mouse said, "I know who that was. That was harmonica."
You don't work for the BBC, do you? Because if you do, I can change, you know. I can change until I get the cheque, and then it's every comic for himself.
The British Broadcasting Corporation, often unforgiving to their finest assets, but no, Mr. Miller. Alas, not in my jurisdiction, I fear.
Oh, no, never mind. And listen, please. It's Maxie. Maxie! The costume isn't perfect, but as an admirer of mine, you've not done a bad job. Not a bad job at all.
I think he thinks you're a stalker, Doctor.
Beg your pardon?
You know, a fanatic, an obsessive. Dressing like your hero and all that.
Like I say, most flattering.
Actually, my dress sense is my own.
Unique, I should say.
Indeed. Unique. Although I must say, perhaps an unintended, half-saved memory from my youth may have inspired my tailoring.
Now, Doctor, steady on. Your youth? You'll give me a bad name. I'm only 40, you know.
Music hall was basically English vaudeville, and Max Miller is played, excellently, by Roy Hudd, an actor and comedian, but he was also the president of the Max Miller Appreciation Society, and a Max Miller biographer. So if you want an unusual amount of accuracy in your Doctor Who story about niche historical celebrities battling monsters, then this is your story. And brilliantly, but bizarrely also appearing for a cameo, is a young actor called Billy, who name drops a couple of his roles. Films like I'm an Explosive and While Parents Sleep, which in real life actually featured early performances by young William or Billy Hartnell.
You should be talking to Billy here.
Really?
Oh, yes. You've been in pictures, haven't you, Billy?
I'm an Explosive.
Yes, and he's been in pictures too.
I've never seen it.
Don't worry, son. No one else has either.
What was the other one you just did?
While Parents Sleep.
Yes, that's the one. Parents were asleep, the kids were... In fact, the whole audience couldn't keep their eyes open.
After Peer Pressure came The Nowhere Place, which for some reason came with two different covers. And if you bought the CD version, you got one randomly. I think the train cover is better, though the one with the door reminds me of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Anyway, this is about something truly alien, Lovecraftian, something that makes a Doctor recoil like an animal close to fire. Something that he compares to falling into the pit of hell.
They'll never get through that bulkhead now.
I think they'll find a way. I think they'll tear themselves and the bulkhead apart trying to get to that door. And I'm not waiting around to see my friend...
Shoot him if he makes another move, Master-at-Arms.
Aye, Captain. Then shoot me! I'd rather die than stay here and watch your entire crew claw their way into nowhere.
You don't know that's going to happen. According to you, you're just as much in the dark as we are.
Yes, I am. In the dark. And that's where I've been ever since I glimpsed what's in store for your planet. Your entire species. Something so alien to the nature of time and space that I was instantly repelled. Like an animal retreating from fire, like the fear of falling into the pit of hell. Almost as if something primal was triggered within me.
You're not making any sense, Doctor.
Hell, it goes past Lovecraft and into Junji Ito or Thomas Ligotti territory. The TARDIS goes forward a few hundred years by accident, and where they should find a thriving, space-based humanity, there's nothing. A nothing so horrific that they instantly track down the cause in the past. It's a human ship called the Valiant. It's on the edge of the solar system. Its job is to defend the Earth and the local human colonies against alien raiders. Humanity is yet to discover interstellar flight, but it's on the horizon. And in the Valiant, a door has appeared. A door on the inside of the hull, leading to nowhere. A door that calls to people, and if they answer, they disappear inside and are never seen again. Naturally, the Doctor and Evelyn investigate. The Doctor scans it and works out that it's 50 billion years old, even though it only just appeared. Evelyn, however, hears its call and is only barely safe from going inside. But she does see what's in there. An infinite amount of faces screaming in pain inside a giant, monstrous mouth.
So shall we go?
Doctor,
What is it?
there was a mouth.
A mouth?
That's what I remember. Around all the screaming faces. It was like a gigantic mouth, wide open, and that's where the words were coming from.
Naturally, the part of the ship containing the door ends up destroyed, and the door is left floating in space, and continues calling people to it. And they come in whatever craft they can. Anyway, there was also the sound of a train coming from the other side of the door. The Doctor tracks it down to 1952, and they decide to give it a visit. I'm going to end my description there, because it kind of goes off the rails after the bit in the train. Pun intended. This really reminds me of Channel Zero. Strong start, good imagery, but it completely devolves into something that makes you feel like you've taken a bunch of downers by the end. So what's actually going on? Something incredibly silly and nonsensical. But to be fair, it's probably impossible to turn that concept and build-up into something satisfying that actually makes sense. Do I recommend The Nowhere Place? Half of it. The first half. Hearing Six spend most of his story being completely fucking terrified is fun, though.
What frightened you, Doctor?
Well, there was something very wrong about the readings.
The readings for Earth?
Yes. You see, I know your planet's history so well. It's always like popping in on an old friend for tea. But this time, just for a second, I got this feeling that I'd stumbled in on complete strangers. You know those dreams? When you go back home, your childhood home, and everything's changed. You know it should be familiar, but not one thing is as you remember it. As it should be.
No, I've never had a dream like that.
Or maybe humans don't have them. Maybe it's only Time Lords. Or just me.
After that came 100, cleverly named because it was the 100th release in the Big Finish Doctor Who main range. It's 4 one-part stories with Six and Evelyn, and each of them includes the number 100. For instance, 100 BC is set in the year 100 BC, and the 100 Days of the Doctor is about the Doctor being poisoned and having 100 days to find a cure. This is a great release and a wonderful place to dip in for new listeners. Each of the stories are tonally very different, and 2 of them were scripted by New Who TV legends. Robert Shearman, who wrote Dalek, and Paul Cornell, who wrote Father's Day and Human Nature / The Family of Blood. The only one of the 4 that I'm not a massive fan of is 100 BC, which is just a bit silly.
I was wrong. We weren't needed.
No hand of fate on our shoulders after all.
It's actually nice for a change. Expecting things to be going wrong, and they're not. It's usually the other way round. But this time, absolutely everything's gone right.
Thank you. Oh, my darling. Congratulations, Aurelia. You have a beautiful baby girl.
Girl?
She shall be called Julia.
Julia Caesar?
Unlike Shearman's My Own Private Wolfgang, which is a ridiculous masterpiece.
He gets to go on living. I get to never get born. This way, everybody's happy.
But Mozart isn't happy. He shot himself.
No, it was probably an accident.
3 times?
No, I was just messing around.
In the head?
No, that doesn't sound like the actions of a happy man, no.
It's a real shame about 100 BC. It was written by Evelyn's creator Jacqueline Rayner, who I usually like quite a bit. She wrote Doctor Who and the Pirates and the Marion Conspiracy. My favourite stories are the Cornell and Shearman ones. The 100 Days the Doctor is a gentle look at the Doctor's life from outside, as he and Evelyn need to travel up and down his time stream to find out when he was poisoned. So we get some introspection and we get to hear about Six's thoughts about his lives without all the blustering.
Pretty girls.
Possibly.
And you're a rather dashing young man. And so...
What?
Thin.
We agreed we could grumble. I didn't say stick the knife in.
He does irk you, doesn't he?
Not him. The way the universe treated him. Being him was like a holiday. Very wonderful holiday.
Doctor?
Look at him. So sure of himself. Always a step ahead. Always prepared to do things I'd never do.
You sure? He seems a rather jolly man.
Well, it looks as if he's made another family for himself. That's often when I'm happiest.
Oh.
Present company accepted. Those two. The girl and the boy.
Another dashing young chap. And she looks as though she can hold her own. She seems very grown up for one of your friends. The present company accepted. They look like brother and sister.
Look, he's waiting for them to do something to save the situation. He's teaching them. Unlike him. From what I've heard, he was always blowing up planets, and they call me the aggressive one.
Who call you that?
The audience.
What?
Those who pay attention to my travels.
Are you hallucinating? There are people watching us.
Or listening to us.
Listening?
They say the pictures are better when you're listening. And in the case of Gallifreyan time-space visualizers, that's often literally the case. I'm talking about the Time Lords.
How do we tell which one is you in a room where every man's wearing a frock coat?
I'm the one not carrying a gun.
The one playing poker, you mean? Oh, but there's 2 of you. The same you.
It happens. If the circumstances are safe, then it can even be fun, especially with a game like that.
You can be pretty sure one won't remember the other's cards. He looks nice.
Will you stop saying that? They're making it sound like you drew the short straw.
Cornell apparently stopped working with Big Finish for a while because of this story. From what I've read, there was an email mix-up and he inquired about the first draft he'd sent in, only to be told they'd already recorded it. But with as good as 100 Days the Doctor is, I wonder what he could possibly have done to improve it for the second draft. My Own Private Wolfgang, on the other hand, is a piece of deranged art, where every guest part is played by impersonator John Sessions. Basically, in the future, there's a roaring trade in Mozart clones who aren't happy with their lot in life, so one of them decides to make the real Mozart immortal, so there won't be a market for his clones, because even someone as talented as Mozart will eventually get stale.
My nose is itching and I'm going to have to listen to Mozart. And the last thing I heard of his was that soundtrack for the remake of the Italian Job.
Yeah, I admit, by your time, his stuff had gone off the boil somewhat. For me, nothing was ever the same once he started using electronic drum kits. Once you've heard one ambient concept album, you've heard them all.
Rob Shearman's stories have a tendency to start off like this, silly and weird, but as he put it in the making of interviews, if he has more than one part, it eventually turns into a bloodbath.
I was always aware that every time I try and do a Big Finish, I try and write a comedy. And they always end up running out of jokes, and then they become really horrible and limbs start falling off, and I write these terribly disgusting things. And I just thought that even as I was doing my little pitch, I could see it getting darker and darker, this story. And so I just suddenly, at the end of the pitch, said, I'm just stopping now. I'm not going to say anything more, because if I do, it'll end up being disgusting. And fortunately, because it's 25 minutes long, it doesn't ever get to that stage where it stops being funny, I hope.
I can't imagine my own Private Wolfgang getting all murderous, but I've listened to enough of his stuff to know that he's not wrong. The last story was Bedtime Story, a serviceable and wonderfully dark story about a malicious alien getting revenge on the descendants of the person who heard it. It's good, but not much to write home about. Next is The Assassin in the Limelight. It's the sequel to both Medicinal Purposes and Pure Pressure. As Dr. Knox is working for the Indo, the monsters from Pure Pressure. It's 1865, Knox is making inroads into the theatre, and has begun by murdering John Wilkes Booth. He's not going by Knox, though, he's claiming to be a guy called Oscar Wilde, which is what tips the Doctor off, because Wilde was 11 in 1865. Knox also has a slight problem, apart from the Doctor. He's caught a mild case of death at some point and is slowly rotting. Not much else to say about this, really. It's not as good as Medicinal Purposes, but better than Pure Pressure. Which is good, because they have the same writer and it's basically a hybrid of the two. I am sad that Leslie Phillips never came back, though. Oh, fun fact, Eric Loren, who played Mr. Diagorus, and who very slowly played human Dalek Sec in Daleks in Manhattan, plays John Parker, who was the guard on duty outside Lincoln's box the night he was assassinated. Parker was an infamous drunk who was found drunk at a nearby bar after the assassination. He continued to drink and was assigned to guard Mary Todd Lincoln months afterwards. She yelled at him for getting drunk that her husband was killed, and he reacted by leaving and getting drunk. He was later fired from his job for getting drunk and falling asleep on duty, and eventually drank himself to death. None of this is pertinent, I just love history. After that was released To Death in the Family, which explains how Evelyn dies. So we'll be skipping that for now. Evelyn's final appearance released were her next three, a trilogy of adventures that brought back the very short-lived 5th Doctor companion Thomas Brewster, a Victorian criminal with a heart of fool's gold. Because Brewster was a short-lived companion, I'm going to cover that trilogy in a separate video dealing with 6's other companions. Stables retired from acting a couple of years after recording that trilogy and died the next year, giving the release an unintended maudlin note that's made even worse, because in the making of interviews in the final part of the trilogy, Industrial Evolution, Colin spends the whole time gushing about how much he loves working with her, and how in awe he is that she'd had health issues recently and yet soldiered on in the recordings. You can really tell that 6 and Evelyn's close friendship mirrored him and Maggie Stables.
Biggest blessing of all is my dear Evelyn Smythe, played by Maggie. And I adore working with Maggie. She's, bless her, she's had a tough year. She's got cracked ribs and things like that, and she still soldiers in here, and she's even a little bit older than I am. So I have every sympathy with her for dealing in extremis with coming along and doing a bit of acting, but she wants to do it, and every word is a gem. I love her to bits.
During the last few years of her life, Stables made a town called Fortune, a Companion Chronicles. Companion Chronicles are shorter releases where the companion takes centre stage, usually recounting the story's events and voicing most, if not all, the characters. They were created to give some new stories to the 1st, 2nd and 3rd Doctor companions, but quickly expanded to the others. When exactly a town called Fortune comes in the chronology is a little debatable, but it definitely happened after the Nowhere Place. And probably not too long after, Evelyn makes a reference to recent events involving trains. Basically, Evelyn and 6 land the TARDIS in a train heading out west, discover that the Doctor is being blamed for a murder that happened years before, and get themselves embroiled in a traditional story of a slave-driving mayor, a gold mine, and unrequited love. I'm not a fan of westerns, so take my opinion with a grain of salt, but I thought this was pretty boring. The story was kinda meh, and many of the characters were stereotypes, and there wasn't much of the imagination I look for in good Doctor Who. Maggie Stables, though, really throws herself into it, voicing almost everyone. And while her 6 isn't as funny as Nicola Bryant's, you can hear that amazingness in The Widow's Assassin, she does a fine job.
Ah, the smell of the Wild West, Evelyn. Can't beat it, the Doctor declared. The smell in question was an overpowering one of leather. We couldn't have been anywhere other than the baggage car. The air was thick with dust motes, dancing in the thin slices of sunlight that spilled through the gaps in the side panels. The Doctor slapped his hand hard on a large brown valise. Have you ever stopped to appreciate, Evelyn, just how fundamental the humble bovine was to the structure of early American society? Well, I admitted I couldn't say I had, and in order to cut short the inevitable dissertation, I made my way towards the door.
Recommended if you like westerns or pure historicals, or if you're an Evelyn completist. Anyway, as I'm trying to be roughly chronological with this video, next up is Thicker Than Water, Evelyn's swan song for the Sixth Doctor. Recorded and released between medicinal purposes and peer pressure, and a sequel to Arrangements for War, though set some years later. It opens with Six travelling with Mel, his final companion, deciding to visit the planet Villag from Arrangements for War, and we find out that Evelyn's now living there, having married Rossiter, the man she'd fallen for during that story. We get flashbacks depicting Evelyn leaving the TARDIS and her current testy relationship with Six as he turns up unannounced years later. He reacted extremely badly to her decision to leave, though he wasn't exactly surprised when she did.
I won't take anything. Fresh start and all that. Rossiter's a good man. Come and speak to him.
Oh, actually, I have to, well, there's a...
Planets to save and villains to thwart.
Something of the kind.
You'll come and see me one day, won't you? Just pop in. Please.
I wish you every happiness, Evelyn. I really do.
Goodbye, then, Doctor.
Goodbye, Evelyn.
His bad reaction that leads directly into the wrong doctors, where he tries to improve his mood by meeting Mel early.
The last piece of chocolate cake. And nobody to bake any more. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits. Exit Dr. Smythe. Oh, Evelyn. They have their exits and their entrances. It's time, I think. Time for Pease Pottage. Time for Miss Melanie Bush. And one man in his time plays many parts.
Which causes a whole other problem in a whole other adventure that I'll discuss in a whole other video. Anyway, this is a rare thing, a story set in a modern-day-ish alien world where there's nothing weird going on. No alien invasion, no dimensional whatsits, nothing. The planet is rebuilding after the invasion and Arrangements for War, and the big plot flows from that. The three countries have united, Rossiter is the elected head, there are various factions, and they're fighting over what to do with the remaining alien tech and alien prisoners of war, and inside it all there's a deeply personal story between Six and Evelyn. While this isn't quite as groundbreaking as Arrangements for War, it's a hell of a good follow-up. The flashbacks depicting Evelyn leaving really feel like a writer who noticed the classic Who trope of companions randomly falling in love in a story and leaving at the end, and decided to do it realistically rather than as a way to avoid murdering the companion. And it is done oh so well. Plus, there's a nice cameo from Seven at the end, helping dovetail Evelyn into him and his companion's ongoing story.
Evelyn, listen to me. There's something that has been preying on my mind. Your charming husband once mentioned that you would never forgive me. It's taken a while, but I think I can show you something to try and balance that a bit more.
Which will be very useful when we get to A Death in the Family and Evelyn's permanent exit. Oh, fun fact, Gary Russell, the original Big Finish boss, wrote a book about Evelyn's latter days in the TARDIS called Instruments of Darkness, and it doesn't line up with this. What makes this confusing is that Gary Russell was still the boss of Big Finish when the story came out. So, you can't see it, but I'm shrugging. Anyway, A Death in the Family does feature Evelyn's death, and it's of great importance to the plot, but it's not really her story. It's a 16-hour story told in 2, and she's a minor character. Now, I don't mean it's crap, because it's not. It is spectacular. It's just very big and constructed like a perfect game of Tetris. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This is a 7th Doctor story, and he's a very different guy from Six. Six is good-hearted and blustering, like a loud suit of armour surrounding a kitten, while Seven is more like an eldritch monster in the form of a gnome.
Doctor, pity me.
Fear me.
What?
Tell this this to your gods. When they punish you, when they stretch you on the neutron rack, I'm still here.
Are you? You're one little man?
No, not a man. Not a human being. I'm a complex space-time event. I am Lord President of Gallifrey, the traveler from beyond time. I am the Sandman, the oncoming storm. I am the Karfarak Gatri, destroyer of worlds. And sometimes, only sometimes, I am your worst nightmare. I'm the Doctor, and I take care of my friends.
And Seven had his own ridiculous plots going on, usually all about Lovecraftian beings and whatnot, but this also picks up on a lot of plots from Six's stories. Like I mentioned before, one of Seven's companions is Hex, the son of Cassie from the Nimrod stories. Her death almost drove Evelyn and Six apart. Anyway, this story's villain is Nobody No One, a word lord. He's basically a Time Lord from an alternate reality where language controls the fabric of reality, not physics. So, think Carrionite. It's a very silly idea, but incredibly well thought out in context, with definite rules and a lot of cleverness.
Oh, the powers this place is granting me, Doctor. Just while we've been having our little chat, 73 people used the phrase, "Nobody tells me what to do." An anxious general said, "No one has access to the silo room," and a lorry driver who's a bad poet in his spare time came up with the line, "Nobody stops the earth spinning or tells the sun when it can shine." I'm gonna have so much fun with this planet. Do you want a preview?
Let go of me.
In a minute. Hey, Doctor! Have you heard? Nobody tells the sun when it can shine, and I say... Stop.
It's night. That's not possible. How is it night?
The story begins with the discovery of an aged 7th Doctor in stasis. It continues with the younger 7th Doctor being murdered by Nobody, and then the older 7th Doctor sets up his own resurrection before time catches up with him and he ceases to exist. That's the sort of thing that Seven does. We get two mini-stories in the middle of the story, one with Hex and Evelyn on an alien planet, and one with Ace, the other companion from the TV show, putting together the older Doctor's clues and arranging the resurrection. This takes months, if not years, and involves emotionally devastating a very nice man called Henry. Then it all comes together in part 4, where nearly half the episode is taken up by explaining how the fucking plan worked. Don't get me wrong, this sounds boring, but it is amazing. I wasn't kidding when I compared it to a perfect game of Tetris. There are so many pieces expertly placed. This plot, which takes 4 25-minute episodes, is the sort of thing that Moffat would tell in the background of the TV show over several years, in reverse, until no one gave a fuck anymore. And it does it perfectly. By the end, Evelyn is dead, and so is Nobody No One, and it's some of the best Doctor Who ever made. And Evelyn goes out like a boss, ripping into Seven for not being the man she knew, not being her Doctor, with his bright, colourful coat and bravado, and then taking Nobody with her. A must listen. Anyway, I'm sad that there probably won't be any more Evelyn stories. I really can't see them recasting her, but never say never. If you want to listen to the best / most important of her stories, then I suggest the Marion Conspiracy, Doctor Who and the Pirates, Jubilee, Arrangements for War, and Death in the Family. But really, she has no all-out stinkers, just a few worse than her best.
Though strangely disguised in bombazine, she is a pirate queen.
I am a pirate queen.
She is 3 cheers for the pirate queen. She has the fearsome, bloodthirsty mien of every pirate queen.
I have
3 cheers for the pirate queen. 3 cheers for the pirate queen. Oh no!
Doctor, you are an enemy of the Daleks. You are to be exterminated.
No, wait!
Exterminate! Exterminate!
But you can't, can you? You can't hurt me at all.
Keep back! Keep away from me!
Or what? How are you going to stop me?
Please remember to like and subscribe to the Doctor Who YouTube channel.